Hello, this is Alex Burkett, and you're listening to the Long Game Podcast. This episode is a part of our Kitchen Side series, where we pull back the curtain and show you the behind-the-scenes conversations, debates, brainstorming sessions, strategies, and other stuff that we have at our agency. In this one, we covered Google's recent I/O announcements, and this includes the infamous, the scandalous, the incredible AI Mode. We do try to root this stuff, by the way, not in the ephemeral hype, the narrow-minded myopia, or the black and white thinking that you see oftentimes in social media, but we really tried to root back and think from first principles, and also at like long-term, long-arc directional trends of search behavior and SEO changes, and how this is an acceleration of existing patterns, such as dark, as in untrackable, like dark social, so dark pools of influence, measurement, zero-click searches, and conversational and highly personalized information interaction. I thought it was a fun discussion, and I even went a little rogue and gave some gray hat ideas for LLM optimization, caveat emptor. Is that how you say that? I don't think I've ever said that out loud. Whatever, buyer beware. Fun stuff. Without further ado, here is the pod.
Do we partner with Peak? Like, surely their customers don't just want reporting. They want, like, what do we do about this?
So you dreamt about ChatGPT last night, Allie.
Oh, God. We're going to open with this. Yeah, it's my best friend now, guys. Sorry.
I just thought it was incredibly lame that you'd mentioned that, and I just wanted to bring that up on camera so everybody hears how.
Thank you.
Like, Allie, what are you up to this evening?
I'm like dreaming about the Knicks. I'm dreaming about martinis. I watched that Bob Dylan movie. I fell asleep thinking about "It Ain't Me, Babe." It's a great song.
Well, dreams aren't always voluntary. It's usually a reflection of your outer reality, and I think I've just been staring at my screen too much. So, folks, go outside. Take it from me.
I didn't read the article yet, but Animals put out an article about one of their employees. I want to read it. He's like talking about his ChatGPT addiction or something like that. It was a really compelling intro. It was like, it started slow. Like I, used it for summarizing my blog posts into LinkedIn posts. And then before I knew it, I was craving the AI assistance or something like that. I don't know. It was really dramatic, like literary introduction. But anyway, I think it's a similar concept where like you just start using it so often that it just becomes a part of your brain. You become a cyborg of sorts.
Yeah. I think I've just been in there. Like I'm in there every day. I don't think that's a bad thing. It's just been a long week. And I think my brain was like, here's all the stuff that's happened, just regurgitated in strange moments in your brain.
Do you guys go outside? Like, do you do non-work stuff?
Well, yeah, but not as much this week as normal.
That makes sense. Well, we've got a holiday weekend coming up, so hopefully you can get outdoors. Hopefully, is it nice in Chicago?
It's still pretty chilly, but it's sunny now. So we're doing a Cubs game this weekend.
It's so crappy in Boston.
Mm.
Is it cold there too? We had to turn our heat back on here. I was like, what the hell is happening?
We can't talk about the weather. I'm sorry I started us down that path. I'm just riffing. I don't know how to talk about AI mode. Like legitimately.
You could just say, okay, we're going to talk about AI mode. I mean, that's what everyone's thinking
about what? Like, how do we go into this as a topic? And there was AI mode was one thing that was announced during Google's I/O. There was 100 things, rapid fire. It was all AI related. So do you guys even know how we should introduce this conversation? What is AI mode?
No.
What does it imply for SEO and growth marketing? David, you've got some thoughts.
I have plenty of thoughts. I mean, I've actually been piling on buying Google stock, so I'm very biased in this conversation. I don't think anyone should be surprised about all of Google's announcements. Like, the interesting thing is just seeing how quickly the sentiments change, where the last 2 years it was Google's going to die or search is going to die. And I'm like, you all do understand that Google has a massive business that isn't just around search, and they have a massive proprietary data set on almost everything we do online. They're not going to die and they're not going to lose in this AI battle. And it's not a zero sum game, but they announced this AI mode thing, which has been in beta for a while. I think they announced they're going to be rolling it out. But when you do a Google search, currently you get your 10 blue links and all the ads. You get the AI overviews at the top, which is kind of an evolution of feature snippets. But there's also this additional tab called AI Mode, which is essentially Gemini put into Google search. Like, you do your normal search, but if you want to convert it into a Gemini conversation, you hit AI Mode and it turns into a conversational search, and it does like all the research and everything. I think a couple big things that have come out of it. The main thing on my mind is for SEOs, kind of fucked in terms of attribution, because you can't, it doesn't send it to Google Analytics as organic search. It sends it as direct traffic. And so that has, second order consequences of, well, if you can't say that this is organic traffic from Google, how will you decide how much more to invest in traditional SEO? I guess I don't know what we're going to call it moving forward, but that part honestly scares me. And I think it should scare a lot of SEOs. And it's sort of Google's chance to essentially stop SEOs from gaming the algorithm, because that's essentially what SEO is.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry to interject. Do you feel like it's actually to stop SEOs from gaming the system and like saving the tragedy of the commons? Or do you think it's a disingenuous play so they can maintain the PR posture that this is good for publishers, that we are bringing more and more traffic to publishers? And that's like a clever play on words because they're getting more searches globally every year. Mm-hmm. But actually, if they gave you the data, it would suggest that it's drastically lower and they're actually stealing a lot of those clicks. Do you think it's like, I guess, good guy Google or bad guy Google?
I think it's both. And I think regardless of whether you call it good guy or bad guy Google, it's Google serving Google.
Self-interest.
Amoral.
That's really all it is.
Yeah. What are we, children? Good and evil?
Yeah. But anyone who was surprised about this announcement is like, have you not been paying attention to the, like, quote, AI arms race that's been happening this entire time? Of course, Google is going to go super aggressive with rolling out AI across all of its platforms, and people will pontificate on whether Google would actually do it or not, and that they're moving slow. And I'm like, for a massive company, they're moving pretty damn fast with these releases. It does seem like they're moving at a faster pace, and I wouldn't be surprised if they rolled it out even more aggressively, like moving forward. Like, it just became a part of every single app and they stopped making a big deal out of it. And you just realize you're using it on the back end without, like, there's nothing on the front end anymore because it's just working all the time. But that's my take. I think Google's going to like take a massive market share. I know OpenAI is getting a lot of like traction and all of that, but Google already has historical YouTube data, search data, Chrome data. Like, that's really hard to compete with.
I like the arms race right now. That's kind of a macro take from the bleachers. Is I think it's actually very exciting to see people innovating and competing again, because for many years Google was just the only player. Mm-hmm. And when you have a monopoly of sorts, you've got like a constraint on basically search and organic behavior, but also on paid acquisition. And now it's like a multi-dimensional, platform fractured approach. And all of these tools are doing very interesting things. Like, they're all good too. That's the fun thing. It's like Anthropic and Claude is a very good tool. ChatGPT is awesome. It's probably my preferred, just for like almost any task that I run. Gemini, I've tried a little bit. I actually don't understand the hype. I think like people who are deep in this field love Gemini the best. I've
been finding that recently too.
I think it's fine. I don't know. It's kind of boring. Like the I don't know if it's just like I'm like a child. Like I'm very like persuadable by like how it speaks to me, but it's just very corporate. Do you know what I mean? Like, ChatGPT calls me like homie at this point.
I feel like it's just because you've used it more. Like, I feel like once you settle into a tool, it becomes and molds by design to what you need it to be, and it becomes more familiar. And like, I remember you were joking, Alex, about like you gave it like a 4-word prompt the other day, and you're like, I don't even have to prompt it as much anymore. Like it knows like how to write and how to spit back what I need. I tried Gemini early on and it did feel a little boring, but I also think it's just where you spend the most time. It becomes like your tool.
I started calling ChatGPT hombrecito, which is like little man in Spanish, because I think it's like slightly demeaning, and I kind of like that.
I was listening to the All In Pod, which has kind of gone downhill, but I had an interview with Sergey Brin. And one of the things he mentioned was like, yeah, these LLMs do a lot better if you threaten their lives. He was like, we don't want to talk about it, but if you actually threaten it, it'll do better.
Oh, I thought if you were nice to it, it was better. You said like, please and thank you.
But then they have to operate under demand and fear. Essentially, you have to put the fire into them. Can you imagine if like all editors who started using ChatGPT to like pull, drafts and outlines together, if they just started like threatening ChatGPT?
Editors are like the most nurturing people I've ever met. So to think that they change their tune completely.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
But anyway, the broader sentiment that I have is it's very exciting to look as like kind of a like, I don't know. I've always had like a mixed view on tech in that like I think that it solves like amazing things, and then there's always like externalized costs in some ways, like DoorDash being a great example of that. It's like it's highly accessible to order meals that you couldn't before, which serves like a ton of purposes, not only, for me, but like just accessibility, right? But there's like tons and tons of downsides of that, like from an economics perspective and even like a social fabric perspective. So outside of like any of the nuanced conversation, like I like tech, I like innovation, like doing the Waymo experience, the self-driving car in Austin was thrilling for me. So seeing the future come together and play out in real time in front of our eyes, where there's like not just one player, but many players who are well-funded, well-staffed, and all of that. That's thrilling. And then the specifics, there's probably some implications that we can play out for marketers with specific Google announcements. I wanted to echo your point, David, that it shouldn't have been surprising. Like if you look, I like to pull myself back out of the day-to-day. And some of the specifics I actually think like you want to note, but ignore, I guess, like, because they might change tomorrow. So even the tracking stuff, they may add additional tracking parameters and like click data in Google Search Console for AI Overviews. Like we don't necessarily know how that's going to play out. You can make some predictions, but like I look at the long arc of directional progress or kind of directionality. And over the past 10 years, clicks have been diminishing across the board. So there's like featured snippets and all of the different multimedia modals that Google has implemented. Zero-click searches have risen even before AI. I don't have the research in front of me, but I think that was a directional trend across most industries. And then with AI overviews, conversational searches, more and more people adopting ChatGPT, getting quick answers, that trend is just very apparent and obvious. So the fact that Google's rolling that out broadly with both AI overviews like universally and the AI mode, genuinely unsurprising. Like that is like the least shocking thing I've ever heard.
Even if it wasn't surprising, I think I speak for everyone in marketing that it's a very exhausting time. Like we've each been kind of DMing each other like, man, isn't this tiring? Like it's kind of, and then you see all the new videos being produced with VO3 that Google is now rolling out. And I'm like, what's real anymore? Like what are we doing? What is content now? And it's just a lot to keep up with. So for anyone listening that also feels a little bit overwhelmed, I thought that I was fine. And then now it's just going even faster and faster. Like Google released that stuff, and then Anthropic released a new version of Claude, and OpenAI released Codex. And I'm like, oh, geez, okay, this is going faster.
To me, it's mostly exhausting, if I can be completely candid and transparent, because I feel pressure as the founder of an organic growth agency to react against it and have opinions and messaging against it.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily know if that's like self-imposed or if it truly is a thing that helps our business maintain course and be like a lighthouse in, stormy weather. But I do think that like amidst like tons of hot takes and like hyperbole on LinkedIn, particularly, but just broadly, it probably is useful for us to have answers or at least be a guiding light. And I think that pressure is more what's exhausting to me than the actual news, is just the pressure to have an opinion about everything all the time and react in real time without actually taking the time to digest it and look at the course of real data and real user behavior over the, not just like a day where like there's spikes and like hype, but like over the course of a week and a month and a year. That's where I get exhausted.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I try to follow up with this stuff, not every single day, because it's not something that gives me life or energy. It tends to drain me. But I will say I've been spending more time in Peak, the AI Insights tool we've been using, and doing some work for an actual client. And that's what gives me energy. I'm like, I wonder if this is how people felt when Google started rolling out and they started realizing patterns, like talking like old early days SEO. So I think there's part of me that's like, this is pretty cool that we get to be a part of. I know we've been talking like new era, new chapter for what, like 2 years now?
New frontier.
So it's not literally new everything, but seeing all these new models and seeing like really notable changes in behavior, and then also seeing the data, or at least as much data as we do have access to, that gets me excited. But I understand what you're saying, Alex, about the pressure of it all. And the few clients that I've been working with who every couple weeks we talk about it, I'm like, you know what? I'm right here with you, and you can trust us that we're going to figure it out to the best of our ability. But I don't have all the answers. And if I did, I'd be making some stuff up. So you probably don't want me to have all the answers.
Yeah.
So I think clients or prospects, that pressure we feel, I think it's more because it's everyone trying to do the same thing at once, which calls on your field notes from a few weeks ago of like, Alex, you were talking about the audience, like who you talk to, and like talking to your peers versus talking to your customers. And like, I think right now we're in this whole mosh pit of everyone trying to do the same thing as us. So there's this inherent like stress and competition. But if we really looked at our customers and our clients, I think they're just looking to lean on someone to help like take charge and figure things out along the way.
People really don't do well with uncertainty. I think that's like a very universal historical pattern that's played out across literally like our entire span as a human race. So when there's uncertainty, people latch onto explanations and narratives. And even if they're like not entirely baked in fact or reality, it's something to hold on to. So that's where you see, I mean, everybody's looking for an answer. I do think that it's important to have some sense of like motion. I don't think like sitting on the sidelines is necessarily responsible. So like there's things, I always say, I'm doing this course right now, and I always say like, we don't necessarily know how the dust is going to settle. Like things change all the time. But what we have is first principles. We have early patterns and early data, and we have experiments. And if we rely on those things, we can still make moves without like sitting there paralyzed by like all of the uncertainty. But I think that, I don't know, like if you had an answer, you see like the market kind of responding with answers like LLMs.txt, like the file that you add. There's like a couple different hacks, like reinforcement learning hacking. There's different like technical strategies being developed, like relevance engineering and vector embedding. And I think like all of these things could play into like a first principles, like it makes sense to think about like, okay, an LLM cannot necessarily read JavaScript. A ChatGPT doesn't read JavaScript. Okay, so we have to format it in a way that it can read. So like, let's establish this new, almost like a sitemap file, right? But the evidence shows they don't even hit those pages. So it seems like it's a nothing burger right now. So there's some logic there, but like having that as a tactic that you can do, I think actually serves like less so growth and strategy. It just serves
makes
like
you feel
certainty.
better.
Yes, it's something you can do.
And I'm sure there are teams where there are leaders, VP marketing, CMO, CEO, who's like, what the hell are we doing? Why aren't we doing it yesterday? And there's a lot of pressure to make even like those tiny hacky moves to demonstrate some sort of progress. And I mean, if that's what you have to do and there's like really no harm, no foul, sure. But I would much rather go straight to the source of my customers and be like, what's your comfort level with AI? Are you using LLMs? Like that, I actually posted the other day about maybe recapping or rehashing persona documentation and just adding that as another input to see if your customers and the people you sell to, or whoever's doing the tire kicking versus the decision making, what tooling are they using? Because I have a client who has a couple different buckets of audiences, and one of their audiences, through some research I've done, like they don't use LLMs very often. That's not to say that behavior won't change, right? But it's not universal just because it is for marketers, right? People have different levels of comfort with these tools, and especially depending on their research, what they can rely on, if they have to go back to Google or to certain like .gov type sites to validate information. So I feel like if you know your audience is using LLMs, for sure, go all in. But there's definitely some more research to be done of like back to first principles, back to like who's buying, who's researching, et cetera, versus like I use it, therefore everybody uses it, or I stay on top of everything, therefore everybody does. I think that might help folks who are kind of freaking out.
I think a good assumption, though, is that your users, if not today, will use LLMs. I think that's a fair assumption to make, as these, I mean, everybody who does Google searches like interacts with AI overviews, which is not the same exact thing as a ChatGPT prompt and conversation, but the world is being trained on using tools like this. So I think that's a good assumption. I think you need a new story and a new measurement protocol to back up that story. And that doesn't necessarily dictate a different tactical or strategic infrastructure. I think a lot of those things still apply, like best practices and foundational things like ICP research, mapping to known topics and keywords where there's non-consensus that you can add unique value, well-structured, accessible, navigable websites, off-page. That's increasingly important. We've obviously gone down that path many times. But we, in the past, have talked a lot about the traffic trap. So we've tried to wean people from the narrative that traffic is good just because it's traffic. And I think now, like, that obviously is imperative to like wean yourself from that idea. But like what plays out in absence of traffic and clicks? What plays out in absence of rankings? Well, you've got to have a visibility layer. So you've got to basically audit like where you're appearing and like how you can like tweak that messaging wise, sentiment wise, placement wise, visibility wise. And then I think downstream of that, you've got to still have some idea as to like how the incremental pipeline and revenue is looking from these efforts. And unfortunately, I know we used to do this. I actually think like the last non-direct click conversion rate of organic traffic to conversions no longer applies for many reasons. A lot of that's direct traffic. So, you know, you might have to bucket things a little bit more coarsely. Like you might have to say all non-paid sources are under one bucket now, or maybe not all non-paid. Like maybe you can still parse out social media and referrals or something like that, but no longer is organic as a bucket. Specifically identifying like organic search. Like now direct might have to play into that. And you might have to actually add some self-reported attribution to get additional color and clarity on if they're coming from ChatGPT versus Google search versus AI mode or something like that. So it's like a different story has to play out as to like where your value is being created, how it's being consumed, and how that's translating into your top line. And the analytics tools aren't there yet. So I think you just have to make sense with what you've got. That's the hardest part for me. Because it's like, if you're a marketer dealing with the uncertainty, and also you've got somebody poking you on the shoulder saying, how are these efforts actually going? And you don't have an answer, you don't have a chart to point to, like that sucks, you know? It's fine for us. We run the business. Like, who gives a fuck? But like we've all been in house. Like, it's not fun to just be like, I think it's working.
Right.
Yeah. That's the tough part. Like, we've talked about this pressure that we're feeling. And I think every marketer is feeling that. Marketing leaders are definitely feeling that. CEOs are feeling that. Like, they're getting questions from VCs of what they're doing about this. And it's tough because there are a lot of folks, our peers, some are quite well known, that are kind of speaking uncertainties despite all this being very new. And I would be concerned of folks kind of believing these phrases, like these very certain phrases of what to do. And sometimes I wonder if, like Alex, you were just being pretty honest too. Like sometimes I wonder if it's detrimental to us, where I'm honestly like, hey, we don't know 100% for sure, but here are the experiments we're running. Here are the hypotheses we have and the data that we have that tells us what has a high probability of working. And we can do these things. But I would not be honest if I told you we know exactly what to do about all of this. And some folks have been very receptive to that message. But Alex, as you said, some folks are looking for a lot of certainty. And I think our role is to try to provide whatever certainty we can with our learnings and data, but not try to mislead folks to think that we have all the answers.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's varying layers of this. I don't think like you shouldn't be 100% certain with anything in life. Like nothing in life exists with 100% certainty. But I do think there are answers. We've often used fitness analogies, and like if you go to the gym like day in, day out and kind of progressively overload and lift more weights and eat in a caloric surplus, you're probably going to gain muscle. But you don't necessarily, you can't, well, you could maybe if you had access to a laboratory, but you don't necessarily know like your muscle protein synthesis and like your mitochondrial activity and like all of the input values that actually lead to the muscles being built, right? And you don't need to. Like you can kind of like in aggregate and on a macro level understand these basic principles that generally parlay into output results. So I don't think like there are like answers or conviction or there's some sense of certainty.
Yeah.
But like even in the classic SEO sense, like you couldn't quantify like what a single backlink did to generate more results on an output basis, especially for the entire website, but even on a given page, like it at no point did we ever have that like precision. So
yeah. The things that I've been sharing with people, I was just in San Francisco. I met with a lot of founders and like other marketing leaders, and they're like, "Hey, how do we appear in these LLM outputs?" I'm like, "Hey, a lot of the tactical things are uncertain, but the basics still apply. Like the foundational first principles thing, like speak to your customers and produce content based on actual questions that they're asking, like voice of customer research. Make sure you're getting mentioned on other websites. Could be backlinks, could just be mentions. That's how LLMs like decide what to pull into these responses. And that is 100% still true. And I'm like, if you don't have anything like that, if you're saying we need a keyword strategy, don't worry about keywords. Like you have sales call recordings, take those, get the questions, produce content based on those questions. And it's like more and more removing, at least like what I'm seeing sentiment move toward is less of the like just pure keyword research and more of, hey, do these actually align to what our customers want to know about? And I love that we're moving in that direction, but it seems like if I feel like we were ahead on some of these things and now the market's finally being like, oh yeah, we should have been doing that all along.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I agree with you. And you're speaking very like white hat and like foundational. I also think that like, if you're creative and like have a little spark of joie de vivre, you know, like you can just like reverse engineer how some of this works. And I'm just going to get a little scrappy and black hat, just riff. But like you can identify using Peak.ai, Geostar, Profound, you can identify the commonly cited sources for your queries and prompts. Just use your keywords, maybe like extrapolate and do a conversational query, whatever. It's not exact science. You can look and say, okay, Wikipedia is being sourced a lot. I don't necessarily know if this is like, you can just rip this right now, but like you can create a Wikipedia page. You can go edit the Wikipedia page. I'm not advising you should do this, but like a creative marketer could think that's something I can do today. Also, there's a million different citations that are just like small blogs. And I bet they would probably take some money and they might even be willing to get acquired. If you could acquire a content site that's commonly cited in the prompts that you care about, you buy that site, you pump a bunch of new content, you change all the content to reflect your brand. I'm just saying this is something that a creative marketer could think about and potentially test. I'm not saying you should do it. It's a little bit scrappy. It's probably unethical. Reddit also is a high cited source. I'm just giving my, like, yeah, I mean, I haven't done any of this. We don't, we work with very reputable clients who don't need to do this stuff. But, like Reddit's gameable. Like, just get a little creative, like
that's the excitement I was talking about.
We're marketers. That's a fucking job. Like,
yeah, that's like the excitement that I was talking about of like, let it energize you and like intrigue you and not overwhelm you too much. I mean, the attribution thing, I think we're all aligned on. That's a little bit freaky, especially the relationships that we have with clients and how we demonstrate value. And I'm sure how in-house teams demonstrate value too. But everything else is just like new and exciting and fun and innovative and a little hacky.
I think it's hilarious in a way and sad in another way that like a lot of the AI processes that have been developed, different tools that people have access to, like ostensibly those should be tools that push you outside of the boundaries of what you did before, or at the very least automate the basic things to get them out of the way so you have time and effort to like do more creative things. Yet what you're seeing happen is like, here's how I'm using AI. I'm using it to publish more content. It's the same fucking keyword research, like blog posts, like educational Wikipedia style library that we were doing before that's ineffective in the first place. We're still repurposing basic ass LinkedIn posts, like from blog posts. It's like, we're just using the same, like these new tools that are like really fun and cool to do like the same exact tactics. That's hilarious to me. I don't know.
Yeah, it was actually funny you mentioned like reverse engineering the prompts. I took a keyword or content strategy we had for a client and I plugged it in and I was like, what might someone prompt to you to come, like to arrive at pieces on these topics? So I was basically asking it how I should talk to it to arrive on like pieces for the keywords. And it helps me come up with longer tail, more conversational queries because those are endless, right? Like you could really like slice and dice them a gazillion different ways and you can spend time trying to figure out the perfect prompt, which is not the point. It's just the point is like getting something in there, figuring out what visibility looks like, reverse engineering through the citations, all that stuff, and then iterating. Because I mean, Peak runs those chats every day, right? And so like sometimes they change. And so if you let it overwhelm you, it can, but you just have to really stay focused on like what you can affect and what experiments you can run and doing so with urgency.
Totally. Do you think, by the way, that idea of like identifying like all like a commonly cited source among your prompts and like buying a content website, like is that an interesting new play? Like basically M&A for like small, because it's like a content site probably doesn't go for like too much like revenue multiple, you know?
Definitely not.
It's like there's no SaaS product attached to it. It's like a niche blog or something. For some reason, like I don't know if they're still being picked up, but like I would imagine that would be, given that off-page signals matter a lot, like how SEMrush, they acquired like Backlinko and one of the search, I can't remember ever, Search Engine Land or Journal.
Search Engine Land.
Whatever one. Yeah. And it's like, I don't think they probably did that for the citations and the LLM stuff, but I would imagine that it's also helping. I don't know, like if you sell mattresses, like there's a bunch of affiliate mattress sites that are probably being cited in reviews. Like,
well,
true.
It feels like an interesting time. It's like content M&A would be like a new playbook.
Well, I think that's been there even for traditional SEO. Like people were doing that, like, oh, this website that writes about mattress reviews is ranking really well. Casper is going to go buy it, or whoever went to go buy it for that traffic. I think those, from my understanding, those pure content websites have lost a ton of traffic, but I think the reason for buying websites, like you said, has changed. Like you don't want the traffic anymore. You want the fact that it has a large footprint that gets cited a lot. Yeah. They're into training data.
That's what I mean. And they're in the training data, right? So they may actually have higher presence and salience in LLMs than they do in traditional Google search.
Yeah. And I would imagine the value of those sites, at least for now, to purchase has probably gone down, because I've seen affiliate sites and I've looked at their traffic data, all gone down. But because
how do they monetize? They monetize based on
affiliate,
traffic, eyeballs, and affiliate revenue, and or ads, which is all going down right now. So if you can buy a site that's cited all over the place for like 90K, 100K, like how else could you spend that money? That's pretty high expected value spend.
And right now it's kind of a weird transition period where people are kind of freaking out about traffic going down and haven't completely changed the way they think about the value of these properties to like, oh, wait, these get cited. So it might be a weird arbitrage moment where you can buy one of those for a low value. And then the ones who don't sell in a couple months or maybe a year are going to be like, oh, wow, I'm glad I didn't sell because I'm getting so much traffic from these LLMs now. And that becomes like a whole, like they kind of update their business model.
I do think that a lot of this kind of ties into one general principle that I've been thinking about, which is like the exodus of traffic and the introduction of influence. And that almost sounds like one of those like trite ChatGPT things where it's like, it's not just like strategy, it's
M-dash
domination or whatever. Like they always do those like two things that like when you really think about it for longer than 2 seconds, you're like, that doesn't mean anything. Like what like I can't even, like that's not even legibly like an idea. But no, I mean, influence was always the currency. Well, influence and attention were always the currency of marketing. That's how you change user behavior, is you capture their attention at scale over time, hopefully through repetition, and you motivate, inspire, persuade, and influence people to change their behavior, which presumably means buying your product or using your service, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot more of that is shifting from the mere attention layer to the influence layer.
Yeah, the interesting thing now that you say that is the end goal of getting people to your website and having that traffic is to hopefully influence them, in which case you come off as a biased source. But now, for some reason, by appearing in LLM outputs, you appear a bit more credible because the LLM has done some work to decide that you are worth citing. And like, I think we've seen, Alex, you might have pointed this out, that traffic from LLM converts like 3x higher. So there's kind of an inherent trust built in there where if someone lands on your site, what's their conversion rate? Like sub 1%.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something interesting happening there where by nature of appearing these outputs, you have some extra bit of credibility.
I think that could be for a variety of reasons also. One, that people who use these platforms are a little bit early adopters, maybe not at this point, but like before they were. And also they are collecting more information before they come to the table.
Yeah.
So you're more likely to close a deal because they've almost self-qualified themselves and compared alternative solutions and fact-checked and pros and cons tabled it out. Because you're not, like in a classic search journey, you might search a couple top-level phrases for us, like best SEO agencies or best organic growth agencies. And you're getting the data from the sites like themselves and sometimes review sites. But in this case, it's like you have multiple prompts. You're like, I'm a 10-person company. I'm looking for technical SEO, da-da-da-da-da. So it's richer details. But I do think, like one big factor that I think teams need to do is like the self-reported attribution, but then following up on the sales call, which I always ask. I'm like, how do you remember what you searched? Do you remember what the conversation was like? Do you remember what you prompted? And the last guy I talked to, he told me exactly like the prompt chain. And I found this like a side point that he made. He's like, well, yeah, I mean, the web knows about you. Like it seems like you guys have high credibility. Like you're cited all over the place. I don't remember how exactly he said it, but it was almost this little aside to indicate that there was like a ubiquity factor that resulted in him trusting maybe the recommendation. So David, I think you're onto something.
Sounds like surround sound.
Yeah, it definitely relates to the surround sound, right?
Yeah. And
that's kind of what these tools are doing in a way, is they're aggregating a consensus about like your specific personalized prompt.
Yeah.
The same client I've been mentioning this whole time, because it's been like a sandbox for me. One thing that we're working on is cleaning up some of the positioning that ChatGPT presents around the client. So this client is well known by the web, all over the place. But as I've been delving into more longer tail, more use case oriented prompts, testing the way that it's mentioned, especially the sentiment that it's mentioned with, is identifying a lot of opportunity to change the way it's positioned when it's compared against other tools. And there's only so much you can do on your own site to do that, right? A lot of that sentiment and those mentions are earned partially through having a good product. Can't hack the system completely. But some of it is going back, again, manual outreach, updating positioning, and then also doing a lot of new outreach to present the product in a new way. So we've been like fixing up site copy and the positioning on those pages, fixing up mentions and in the blog's own content, and then doing a lot of outreach to fix that. And so when folks do see the product and they come onto these sales calls, they're pre-qualified, but in the right way. And they don't make assumptions or ask questions that then kind of DQ them accidentally in the process. So that's really good for organic growth, but it also, I think, is demonstrating value of our work and the team's work that we're working with across the whole business, so that like those conversations can move faster once they get started.
I think that may be the actually more important layer that we're figuring out is like, if we use that model of like attention and then influence, we need a 3 model. Like everything's got to be 3s. So I'll think about that. But like the attention is like your visibility in relation to categorical prompts and like basically the surface areas where you'd want to be. And, it's a function of off-page brand mentions, all the stuff we discussed before. And then it's like, are you accurately being described? Are you persuasively being described? Is your messaging consolidated and up to date? And, that stuff's probably even more important if you're like a well-established brand, because your visibility is probably fine. Like a lot of this stuff it almost corresponds with human nature and how you would think about like, brand awareness, maybe, or market share. Like if you look at like a prompt and you look at like 5 competitors, it almost always orders out that like the biggest company and the most well-known is the most visible in LLMs. So it's not rocket science in some ways, but they're not always accurately described. And that's where the influence layer comes in, which is like an extremely important surface area. It's so cleaned up. It's so summarized. It's so personalized. It's not a website with like 100 pages where you're clicking between each of them, and how you're described within that parameterized list of 5 alternatives to whatever solution you're looking for. It's a crazy important surface area.
Yeah, when I started reviewing some of this, I thought that those sentiment details were being pulled from reviews, which are hard. You can't go back and change them. But I realized that 90% of the citations were third-party articles that had pulled maybe from the site copy itself, or they pulled from reviews. But my point being, you have a little bit more sway on those kind of publications. If you have the relationship, or you do the outreach, or maybe you do an exchange of some sort, or you just ask for a favor, there is some influence on those mentions, more so than the forums and the review sites, which I think should stay intact.
Yeah, I had a very similar conversation with, how do I refer to them? They're a large public company with dozens of products in their umbrella. One of them is a learning management system. And they were saying, hey, whenever we prompt ChatGPT to see how it presents our product, it always says that the best benefit is that it integrates with the rest of our products. And they're like, that's not the only thing. Like, our product is very differentiated across with the other LMSs, but this is the one thing that it just only brings up. And I said, well, that's probably because, one, it starts with your product page. That's probably the thing that it keeps talking about. And therefore, when people write about your product, that's all they talk about. Like, that's the only differentiator that you were mentioning. And so they're going to need, I think, Alex, you've talked about like how product marketers are probably the ones that are benefiting the most from all of this. Like, because the value is so, if you're not positioning your product or company correctly, guess what? That's what's getting fed into these LLMs. And that by nature, when someone writes about it, they use ChatGPT for research. They look at your website. They're going to keep, what's the word? They're going to keep saying that same positioning over and over again, unless if you tell them differently. So my advice to them was, hey, next time you talk to Gartner for the Magic Quadrant, make sure you talk about other differentiators beyond being integrated into your ecosystem. Make sure if you ever do any PR, you are very tight on how you want to position this product. Otherwise, it's going to keep perpetuating this positioning you don't want.
This is another example of the foundations, the rise of the foundations coming back, because I think product marketing is the root document, and then there's the distribution components. But yeah, because it's not just pulling from the website, but if you really think about it, like just structurally, logically, how are the other sites that are mentioning this company, this hypothetical company? A lot of the times they just go to the website and they'll pull information and messaging from a landing page and then rewrite it a little bit. You know what I mean? That's how most listicles are created.
That's what I did for every listicle. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So how you describe your products, I mean, it's really, really foundational, like the positioning, the messaging, the differentiation, the use case pages, the navigability of your website, how it's structured, how a user would naturally go through it to the about page, to the use case page, to the industry page, all of that stuff, the foundational website product management mixed with product marketing, then moves out into the world, and you have some control over that. Customer marketing potentially through review sites and through customers talking about you, user-generated content depending on the industry. Brand marketing, right? And that's going to also relate to PR, digital PR specifically. And those are sort of the megaphones or the extensions of that. But it all comes back to that root document of how you're being described in relation to the market and to your ICP.
Yeah. And to add to that too, I've had at least 3 different conversations about this one topic around specificity on positioning. So I spoke to one prospect who has an inventory management software. All their content on their site just broadly goes after inventory management as the head keyword and various general broad use cases of inventory management software. But the thing is, they target 36 different industries. But because those more industry specific keywords, like traditional keyword research, those tools show that inventory management software for government has 30 searches per month. And so they haven't targeted that. But someone who wants to find their specific use case is going to go to ChatGPT and say, what is the best inventory management software for government or for manufacturing companies? And so the way to show up for that is ignore the search volume. If those are the industries you're going after, have blog posts talking about how to do inventory management for that specific industry, for manufacturing. Have use cases of customers in manufacturing on how they use your software. I think more and more folks need to realize that, again, the value is in a long tail. And if you're ignoring it just because it's low search volume, you're not going to be specific enough to appear in these super long paragraph prompts of specificity.
Search volume. Is search volume dead? Should we make a claim today? I was talking with, this client just keeps coming back. And prioritizing what we're working on, right? So it's like that comes down to a lot of the conversations I have is like, what are we going to spend our time and our scope on? And, I was delivering a couple different ways of doing work over the next quarter to hit on a couple different goals. And my proposition was, let's do the setup I have that checks the most boxes. So we can optimize for LLM visibility, like the knowledge gaps I've seen across the board, showing up for some bottom funnel searches. And then I want to go deep on this head-to-head competitor piece that has 20 searches a month. And one of the people on the call was like, oh, that's really low search volume. And I was like, it doesn't really matter. Like we've seen a ton of the product shows up a ton across all these other prompts I'm searching, but this specific cluster, if we want to call it that, really poor visibility. And it's a key product line of theirs that has one of the biggest profit margins for the business. So we obviously want to like raise it up a little bit in visibility. But this person was pretty hung up on search volume, and we just had a conversation about it. We're like, this is just one metric to look at. One, it's estimated. Two, it's on one search engine. And we're trying to optimize for multiple search engines. And the way I was going to fashion the article was a lot more conversational in nature to test, we'll say, its visibility in LLMs. But after the call, I was like, are we even prioritizing with search volume anymore? Like, I really don't think so.
I think I disagree with that, because search is not dead in any sense. Like the amount of people searching on Google is still extremely high, and it approximates demand for a category if you extrapolate the specific like variance. So like you can stack rank opportunities, and then you can use like unique language and ICP, voice of customer, to fill out the individual details, but you can still use it to basically approximate the amount of people who are in demand of this type of thing.
Yeah.
So I still think it's useful. I think it's one variable. Obviously, like search volume is just like the amount of people searching for a thing. Like it doesn't really tell you like, are they the right exact customers for you? Are they high intent? Like there's a bunch of other dimensional details that it doesn't entail, but I don't think it's useless at all.
Yeah, I just think as like an individual proxy to value, I don't look at it that way. I mean, and typically high search volume topics are very top funnel, very general, educational in nature. Not always, right? But usually it's 2-3 word queries that are typically what is, how to. There's still value around that. I know we made a point about topical authority being another feeder for LLM visibility and helping connect dots between like informational prompts and then product examples. But in terms of, David, what you were saying, like don't skip it just because it has low volume. It's more so like it's...
I agree with that. I want to tie in an idea actually, but I want to give a counterexample first, because we're very B2B myopic. And I do think that in our space, it's mostly informational, high-level stuff that gets high search volume, but that's not true in other spaces. So if you imagine a supplement website who's comparing different products and product pages to prioritize for their optimization, and you look at ashwagandha benefits, ashwagandha versus whatever, I'm getting out of my depth here, and then compare that to another supplement, like that's obviously a really good prioritization mechanism, and that does relate to like their product details and even product inventory decisions. So I don't think like in B2B SEO, a lot of the times like we're dealing with like a spectrum of like high search volume and like kind of low intent to like low search volume, high intent, but that's not always the case. Interesting idea. Jevons paradox. Do you guys know what this is?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. So it's a principle proposed by William Stanley Jevons in 1865. that states technological advancements that increase the efficiency of resource use may paradoxically lead to an overall increase in resource consumption. This occurs because as the resource becomes more efficient and cheaper to use, demand can increase, potentially offsetting the efficiency gains. So it's a complicated topic, actually, like if you really dive into it. But Brian Mosley wrote an article for AirOps on this, applying to SEO and content, given that resource efficiency is increasing with content production. Now, there's multi-dimensions to this. So it's like, I sort of misunderstood it at first in that the end consumer consuming information, I feel like demand is almost finite in the sense that there's a finite amount of people and attention. Although if the friction to consuming that information is lower, then potentially they can if you can get like an answer in a prompt, you could possibly prompt 20 times in the space that you would normally have read an article. Does that make sense? You're not consuming 20 increments of something that you used to maybe consume one increment. So in that sense, I could see it. But anyway, they explain more in the comment section of this LinkedIn thread. And I found it fascinating in the sense that like there's always constraints. So like us working with a client or an employee working in-house at a company, you have a finite amount of resources, money, time. So oftentimes like you get constrained to, let's say, 4 blog posts and 2 like case studies per month. Like that's what you have time to create. And now, like if we presume that the efficiency gains through something like AirOps or ChatGPT or automated briefs, Surfer, whatever tool, there's a million tools that are helping us produce content faster. That sort of unlocks that and it blows apart your prioritization matrix, because now maybe you could produce more of those low volume content pages that do have value, but they just wouldn't have appeared in the roadmap given the resource constraints before in the 4 blog post, 2 case study model. If you could 10x that, like you're suddenly going to include a lot more of those low volume pages. Does that make sense? So maybe it allows you to capture more value.
Yeah.
This is kind of a complicated topic to go down. Does that make sense though? That seems like incredibly exciting.
I'm following.
Yes.
Like you can hit more angles and maybe like if marketers kind of expand their worldview and not just produce the stuff they would have before, but like faster and shittier, but allow themselves to actually produce pages that have utility and information and unmet user needs that wouldn't have made it to the roadmap in previous years.
Yeah.
That could be good for brands and also maybe good for the users because there's now information about things that didn't exist before.
Yeah, I think that's a conversation we've been having internally too. Like, hey, the historical timelines we've told ourselves of what's possible don't apply anymore. Like it shouldn't take, however, like let's say for writing an article, let's say like if it took 3 weeks to write an article with editing, writing and all of that, it should take less than 3 weeks. Like objectively, it should take less than that with the efficiencies that we have. If it used to take a month to create an original survey, gather survey responses, do the outreach, and then like analyze the data, and it should take less than a month. Like all the timelines that, not just us, but for any marketers or anyone doing any sort of work, like developers included, that timeline should be compressing. There isn't really an excuse for it to continue being the same. Like if the way that you did it a year ago, like if it still takes the same amount of time, either you're doing a lot more in that time or you're not adjusting the way that you're operating. And I think it is kind of a forcing function for a lot of us to revisit how we think about doing work, and whatever that law is, where like the work will take up the amount of time you give it. I forgot what that's called. Yeah. So if you
Parkinson's law.
Yeah. If you keep saying it's going to take 2 weeks for this thing, it's going to take 2 weeks. But if you say, hey, I'm going to do this in 1 week, guess what? You're going to find some way to make it fit into 1 week. And it's even easier to do that now.
And that's on the marketer side. That's on the producer side or the creator side, which I think the benefits there are obvious. But even on the user side, like I have had so many times in my life where I've searched for something and just the piece of content or the experience or the product or whatever you want to call it didn't exist because I have such a jagged edge in terms of what I'm interested in that like a lot of the incentive structures for creators was really to map to the broadest, highest reach, most circular round surface area. Whereas like a lot of user needs are actually quite custom and weird. And there's like only 10 people that really care about this thing, but they really care about this thing and nobody else has created it. So maybe we can hit some of those farther corners of user interests and needs. Yeah. I think that's fascinating. Like that's really cool to me.
Which is why like voice of customer and sales calls, CS calls, even churn calls, reviewing forums, looking at how people actually talk about their, like, what they want and what they need and their pain points, and using that language to inform the content that you write, whether you write a piece around a phrase or you work it in, to a positioning component on the site, like really using that more not conversational, but how people speak, like really speak, and not running it through like and sanitizing it with generic keyword research, just to hit as many people as possible.
And we're going to need ways to filter this. If there's an additional information oversupply, you can't just like fit it all within the same like surface area, whether that's a SERP or a social feed. Like it would expand infinitely. So like the platforms and then the user behavior on those platforms hopefully like starts to really like surface more of those highly relevant, specific, personalized versions of what you're looking for. And obviously that material has to exist, right? So there's the creator incentive. Some of that can probably be generated from generative AI if it follows certain logic patterns, right? But yeah, I mean, hopefully like AI Mode and like Gemini and ChatGPT and all of these tools help kind of surface more of that specific info. So when you search something incredibly specific, like I've used this example in the past, like how to write a welcome email. Now maybe it's like, I want to write a welcome email for a newsletter that is for cryptocurrency, and I have 90,000 subscribers, and like it's got really specific parameters, and maybe there's info from a cryptocurrency blog that wrote, you know what I mean? Like maybe you can get that information straight, as opposed to the Google SERP, which would just be HubSpot's dumb guide to welcome emails.
Probably written by me.
I'm sorry.
Many years ago. No, it was. Yeah.
But you know what I mean? It's like, it would not, like, just because the content could generically apply to many people doesn't mean, like, I feel like most people are like 75% satisfied with something like that. And in aggregate, that's like great satisfaction. But personally, individually, it's like not great. You want to be 100% satisfied or 99% satisfied. Gotta end on optimism.
Yeah. Get excited, people. It's a new frontier. We're here. It's arrived. Don't be surprised.
All right, let's jump.
See ya.
See ya.
Bye.